In this video, I'm going to cover the material that we talked about in class yesterday, and I'm also going to step you through assignment 2 with a possible, some ways you could do the requirements for that assignment. So if we look over at the assignment specifically, you're creating a max patch with dynamic variation using the tools we learned in class. Vary the panning of the oscillators in your sound, vary the volume of the individual oscillators, and vary the frequency of the oscillators. So these are all things that you should consider including. You don't have to have all of them, but they are just some possibilities for changing sound. Be sure to include in your patch to create an additive synthesizer in Max 9 that uses at least 8 oscillators. The mute button, which is included on the posting of the assignment, and also these objects, the random object, the counter, the metro, the load bang and load mess, or load mess. You don't have to have both of them, just one of each or one or the other. And then the K-slider, which is the keyboard interface. Great. Okay, so let's get started on how we would do this. So first of all, I want to start with some of the things that we've been talking about in class or that were covered on Tuesday. So first of all, the load mess is an excellent, just load mess and load bang are really great at preloading data or preloading things in your projects, right? So the load mess, for example, if I have a float box here, when I load this patch, it's going to automatically load a 0.5 into this box. If it's, some parameter or what have you, that it'll kind of preload some data. The load bang does something similar, except that it loads a button, or what we used to call a bang. I'm not really quite sure if it's still called a bang. It's obviously a button. If we look over here, button inspector. But imagine you want to load again like a random number into a box. You could connect a bang to the random and then to an integer box. And then when you load this, it's going to automatically, I forgot to add a value here, 1000. When I load the project, it's going to automatically generate a random number for that parameter or whatever you have, right? The next thing that we talked about was being aware of the difference between a message, right? This is called a message. And the quick key for that is M for message. And then this, of course, is an object. So I would create this by hitting N, right? And then typing cycle tilde, etc. So just be aware, too, that if you're trying to copy someone else's patch, it's really important to be careful recognizing, that's a message, this is an object, etc. So just something to be aware of. The last two things that we talked about are using, well, not the last things, but important things too, is using the inspector and the help file in the program. So the inspector is the thing that I'm able to use to change the parameters or change the color or change all sorts of different things about objects. Mostly it's related to GUI objects. So the graphic interface, for example, of the load bang, is that it flashes with this, with this kind of bluish gray. I can change this color, for example. There's not a whole lot I can do with this button, but if I highlight this object, the button, and I hit Command I, it will open the inspector over here on the left or on the right. And you can see there are things I can do. For instance, I can ignore click, meaning that basically it's not interfaceable anymore. It's only going to flash, but I can't click on it, which could be useful in some form. Imagine I want to make the blink color red. I don't know, maybe it's dire, so it needs to be a dark red, right? Now this button is going to blink in a dark red instead. So that's an option, like changing the color. I love the GUI stuff. I'm always changing things. And then the blink time here can be useful too. Right now the blink time is 200 milliseconds, but imagine you have a metronome that's running at 100 milliseconds. If the blink time is 200 milliseconds, you're not going to really see the blinking. So you might want to change this down to 50 or something. That would make it flash way quicker. And then you could actually see really quick flashing going on. So that's that object. You might also, again, we talked about slider. Like this is a data slider, which is of course different than the gain slider, in that the gain slider is for managing the volume of signal. This is just for managing data, right? So over here in the inspector, again, I can change the colors. I could change the style. I can also do other things with it. The most important thing is down here, where if I want to turn the slider into a float output, I can click on the float button. I can also change the range, right? So for instance, if I wanted the value to be between 0 and 1, I would turn on the float value and change the range to 1. And now my gain slider here is going to be, or sorry, not my gain slider, my value slider is going to be between 0 and 1 instead. So really useful, but that is essentially what the inspector does, is allows you to change the parameters of these things. Similar with the button. This is where I can change the text, change the colors, etc., whatever I want to do with this button. The last thing here is the help file, right? So it's really incredibly useful to use the help file. So if I use the Command or Control H while something is highlighted, it's going to open a help file. Oops, Command. Oh, are you serious? Well, on a Mac, why is it? That's weird. Why is that happening? Because the Mac's hide is Command H, it's having a conflict. So if I right click on this object, I can say open random help, right? So if I do this, now a help file is going to open up about the random object. It's going to explain how it works. It's going to give me an example. There's all kinds of stuff here that we can do with it. I can also look beyond. There's some other boxes here about some more parameters, some more complex things you can do with it. For example, giving it a whole set of different values. And then really useful to me is the question mark, where I can find other objects that are related, which are really useful if you're trying to figure out, for example, I don't know, you're trying to find something that's similar to a random number generator, but it's going to generate in a different way. And we talked about drunk in that way. Okay? So, but let's get into this assignment. So the homework assignment is to create, again, a synthesizer using the keyboard that has 8 oscillators and has all these objects. So the first thing we want to do is grab the mute button, and let's also grab the panner. So I have already downloaded those. I mean, obviously they're on my computer, so I'll just grab them. If I go to Max projects, this is just my own folder, obviously. Various examples, the Max Mute. So I'm going to open this. So here's the Max Mute, and if it's unlocked, I can just Command C to copy this, and then make a new project, new patcher, and Command V to paste it in there. So there's the mute button. Let's get the panner. So I'm going to go down here, same place. Panner right there. Open it. Don't tell me I copied over it. Okay, there it is. So now I'm going to grab this and paste it in here too. Oops, why is that? Paste it into this file. So now we have the mute and the panner. And I'm going to use both of these in this project. So I need to have 8 oscillators. So I'll use a comment, 8 oscillators. Another thing I can do, for instance, with a comment here, is if I open the help file, I can change the font size. So this can be really, it's kind of looking small, so make it a little bigger. I need 8 oscillators. I need to vary pan, vary frequencies. Maybe these are the things I'm going to do. And vary volumes or gain, right? of the individual oscillators. So let's start with, I'm going to use the note in, first of all, which is the keyboard input, right, to make that keyboard work. Zoom in a little bit. Connected to a K slider. And then again, the K slider, really importantly, is outputting MIDI notes, right? So we do not want MIDI notes going into the oscillators. We want the frequency. So we use the MTOF object, the MIDI to frequency object, to convert that value to a frequency. And then it's going to go into the oscillators. So let's build an 8 oscillator synthesizer. I'm going to use saw waves and sine waves, and maybe a couple square waves, which are actually called rectangle waves in Max. So cycle we'll use for we'll just start with this. Let me also make a saw. I can't stress enough too how useful option drag is, and rectangle. It's so useful to kind of duplicate things quickly, right? If I really want to duplicate something a bunch. So these are what I'm going to use. And now let's add some gain sliders to all of them, because again, we want to control these individually. So I'm just going to resize these a little bit, and I might just grab these like this and quickly pull them out here so we have a bunch. Connect them all. So remember, all of these oscillators too are coming out with they're mono signals. They're not stereo. They're simple mono signals, and they will be converted to stereo. Obviously, they need to be stereo for the panner because the panner is recognizing 2 speakers. Great. Okay, so each of these now needs to receive the frequency, right? But I don't want them to all get the same frequency. So we're going to use the harmonic series again. So I'm going to make a new object, multiply by 1, right? And don't forget the decimal, because if you don't keep that decimal, it will get dropped by the next object. So, or basically it gets dropped by. If I make this, the decimal would disappear before it goes into the cycle. And in this case, it's not the end of the world, but it could be more problematic later. So it's important to recognize when you're using a float versus an integer number. So connect all these and then do the harmonic series. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Great, and then I'm going to connect all these. Now again, if I shift click on here, I can just go to the next one. I don't have to start from the beginning every time making these cables. Great, so there's my synthesizer. I'm going to grab this whole thing, move it up as high as I can. Let's actually grab this too, move it down. Just give me more room. Great. So I could, if I wanted to, route all of these signals now down here to the left and right, right? And maybe what I'll do first is go into my panner. So let's grab the panner and move it up a little bit. Oops, don't want to lose those. Stick the panner there. Move this down again. So first of all, we know the panner is going to go into the left and the right outputs of the mute button. So that is set now. And now I need to just run these oscillators, right, all these gains into my panner. So as I said, I could do this, right? I could run every one of these in here like this. But then again, we don't have a master gain controller. So it's really useful to have a master gain controller for all the volume, right? So we want to consolidate all these gains into another gain. So I'm going to grab this gain, option drag down here. Maybe I'll even change its color a little bit so that it's, let's do red again. I love these reds. So now I know that that's my master gain. And I'm going to run all of these signals into here. Great. So now I have a master volume control, and I'm ready to go. So now, again, it's important to remember this is still a mono signal. It's still only one signal. It's not stereo yet, right? So what I need to do is route this into both the left and the right, basically to make it turn into stereo down here. So really important too. If you'll notice on the gain slider, this is an audio signal. This is not, right? So don't be confused thinking that this output is actually the right channel. It's not the right channel. It's the value of the gain slider. So it's just a number being sent out. So what I would do is grab this signal and put it in left and right. Okay. So we should now get a synthesizer if I unmute this and I turn this on. And I turn these values up some, we should hear this make sound when I play it. Let me set this panner into the center, and we do. We hear sound. So, and again, what's really nice about the mute button down here is that the key command to use this is Shift M, and that will toggle the mute for you. So if you do Shift M, it's going to mute and unmute this. Great. So we're at the place now, right, where we can talk about how we're going to make this vary the way we needed to for the assignment. So we want to vary the pan, we want to vary the frequency, we want to vary the volumes of each gain. So the first thing we'll do is vary these volumes. Okay. Now I wanna keep this one, the first one here, as actually the fundamental. So I'm not going to change its volume. I'm going to keep it consistently the loudest sound. So we're going to exclude that one from the values that are coming out. So what I'm going to do is connect a button or a bang to the keyboard. And now when I play the keyboard, it's going to also bang the value for the button. And we're going to send this to an array of random objects, right? Random. And in this case, let's use drunk, right? So remember I talked about drunk in class. Drunk allows me to generate random numbers. So we're going to do values between 0 and 127. But I only want it to ever step 20 away, right? So the problem with random, of course, is as it can generate a random number. One number can be 1, and then the next number is 127. And that's a very extreme jump in the value. So if I want to eliminate extreme jumps in the value, if I use drunk, now the value range is from 0 to 127. But the furthest away a random number is going to be generated is within 20 of the previous number. So this is a really great thing to use. So included with drunk, we're going to generate random numbers. So I'll just connect a float or a value so we can see it. And I need 8 of these, right? I'm going to move this down here. I'm going to just do this. Actually, I need 7, right? Because we're not using the first one. So now I'm going to run these chords into each of these inlets, right? So we want to trigger these drunk objects every time a note is played. Oops, wrong inlet. I could have shift click and then right, I can do this. Okay, so, and now what I need to do is run these random objects into the first inlet of each gain slider, right? So, I mean, there's only one inlet. So I'm going to grab the first one and put it here. The second one and put it here. The third one in there. You know, and this takes a lot of careful work. You have to make sure you're clicking in the right place, make sure you're on the right one, etc. And do this, okay? So, you know, let's talk now about encapsulation, which was part of the lesson yesterday. Right now, this is kind of getting messy, right? There's all these cables everywhere. It's kind of a hot mess. So what can we do to clean it up? one thing that would really help is to hide these drunks, right? To get them out of the way so that they're not, they're kind of in a consolidated folder, right? So what I'm going to do is click on them or select them like this. If I go up here to edit and I go down to encapsulate, you can see what that's going to do is it just turned this into an object that looks like this, right? So it does clean it up. It's a little messy still, but we could use it this way. Another possibility is that we decide to encapsulate this entire thing. So let me undo that encapsulation. Let's actually move this up here. See, it's kind of, this is very common in my patches where you'll have to kind of keep moving this down to make more room for things because it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So if I scoot that down, bring this over here, I'm going to encapsulate this entire synthesizer now. So I'm going to grab all these gain sliders, not the MTOF, all of these. In fact, let me not do that too, and hit the shortcut is Shift Command E, which is encapsulate. So you can see now my entire synthesizer now, and I can right click on this and type in synth, is inside this small little box, which is really nice because now you can see how much room I've saved. And I can also now double click on this and open it up in its own window. Okay, so here's a perfect example too of like, maybe I want to start by loading values in all of these in all these gain sliders. Right now they're all quiet, right? They're all going to be silent. So if I do a load bang for this toggle, right? Or sorry, for this button, it's going to automatically generate all of these volumes, right? Interesting though, remember how I skipped this first one? So now this one is not going to have a value. So I'm going to set this one with a load mess 127. We're going to do full volume for this. Okay. Now when I load this, it's going to automatically be at full volume every time. Great. So we've already now done this. We've varied the volumes of our pans, right? All of these pans are going to vary in volume. Now let's vary the panning too, okay? So what I can do is, if I want to, I could use the same kind of operation, right, for this input down here on the bottom, the panner. So what I'm going to do is create another random, and maybe this time I don't mind it jumping big. It's going to jump pretty large. Now, there's a problem, right? Random cannot generate random float values. And the problem, of course, is that the input for this is between 0 and 1. So how do we get around that? We get around that with one of my favorite objects. So I'm going to make a random number generator that's random 1,000. Connect the random object. And then I'm going to use scale. So scale basically does, what you expect. It's going to take the values of 0 to 1,000 and scale them from 0 to 1. So it's incredibly useful tool for, the problem is a lot of times the data coming in is in the wrong range that you need. So this is a way of converting that data. So a random number now is going to be generated, right? If I connect this here, if I make a float down here, between 0 and 1,000, and that's going to be converted into a float value between 0 and 1, right? So 628 becomes 0.628. So really useful. So now I'm going to connect this. Let's delete that box. Connect this to the dial. And now every time I play a note, it's going to randomly generate that note, or the panning for that note. And there we go. So once again, we're now going to just connect these panners, or these gains. So I could use this bang if I wanted. I could literally pull this bang all the way over here like this. I could connect just from here straight to this bang. whatever. But I'm just going to connect these bangs together like this. So now every time I generate a note, it's going to also generate a random panning value for that note. Okay, so you can, let's hear how this sounds. Unmute. So we're getting kind of an interesting sound on each oscillator. Every time a note is played, these volumes change, right? So now we have varied panning. Let's talk about varied frequencies. So there's a lot of different ways of generating varying frequencies, but you could do something very similar, right? So let's take a look. I'm going to move this stuff around a little bit to make this clearer. I'm inside the synthesizer, right? Let's put these down here. Yeah, that's fine. So a little trick too, if you're wondering, like you can option lasso and highlight the cables. And then if I use Command Y, it will straighten all the cables. And then I could, if I wanted to, you know, if, it depends on how, I don't know. Some people like to really make sure stuff looks really clean. I'm kind of in the middle about making things look clean. And now these are kind of routed that over there, but it's a little bit cleaner. Okay. So, interestingly, these numbers can be changed. So right now, the 3 multiplying this rectangle by 3 is going to multiply the frequency by 3 and send it to the square wave, right? But I could change that number right here. So the 3 now could turn into a 6 or an 8 or whatever if I add another randomizer to this inlet right here, okay? So let me do that. I'm actually just going to drag this over here. I'm going to copy the same thing and add it to this. So now, and again, I have to think about values. Do I really want to multiply the frequency by 127? Probably not. That's going to be huge, right? So let's set this to 10, for example. And then maybe the range between every note is only going to be 2, okay? So now, instead of this being an 8, it could be a 4, it could be a 6, it could be a 9, it could be a 3, right? Within 2 of that range. So that's all I need to do. And I can set this up on all of these if I wanted to, right? Connect that there. Let's just do actually these 4. The rest will keep the way they are. Otherwise, we'll end up with really dissonant, like really kind of ugly sounds. So anyways, remember that coming into the keyboard over here is this value for the cycle, you know, for each of these oscillators. I could also use that to generate another bang, okay? Now I could also just run this bang up here, but just to clean it up a little bit, I'm going to make another bang and connect it to these drunk objects. Okay, now this should work, but there is an issue I'm concerned about happening. We'll see if it works. So let me close this and then unmute and play some notes. So I think it is, yes, it is working. So you can see these numbers that are posting in here, and they are changing these numbers. Now remember again, even you see a 5 here, but you don't see a 5 down here. It is a 5 now. It's just not showing you that it's a 5. So these numbers, and again, they're not going to change dramatically, but now they are changing every time I play a note. So, but remember, the first 4 oscillators aren't changing. So we're still getting the pitch from these 4 oscillators, and then we're getting some enharmonic, cool effects from these 4 oscillators, right? Now, let's take this one step further. Like, imagine I want to, and you know, again, this is not something you'd have to do, but imagine I want every single oscillator to have its own pan. I could do that. It would be really not that hard, actually. I don't think it's that hard. No, we'll take this a step further and then be done with this. So what I would need, of course, is this panner to be inside the synthesizers, right? So imagine I have a synthesizer. In fact, let's make it a little bit easier and just make 3 different synthesizers that each have their own panning, okay? So the first thing that's problematic, of course, is this, right? I'm going to delete this. Well, actually, that's not true. Let's do this. We're going to delete that. What I'm going to do first is turn the volume into 2 sliders, right? Because if I want to change the value, if I want the main volume to change, it now has to be 2 sliders because it's a stereo signal. So let's move these down here. Actually, we're just going to, yeah, we're going to put those aside because we're going to need them in a minute. The panners now, I'm just going to grab the panner, copy it, and delete it. And then come up here to the synthesizers and add a panner for each synthesizer. Okay, copy this up here. Let's delete that. Oh, actually, I'm going to need that. And now I'm going to run this synth into here. And I'll run the bang to the bang, right? But now what I need to do is copy this for every one. So for the other 2. So I grab all of these things, option drag over here for synth number 2. We'll pull this down here. And then the same thing again, right? Let's put this up here for synth number 3. So just make sure I connect everything. The volume in there, volume over here, volume in there, volume there. The bangs need to be connected in there and in there. And now I need to consolidate all of these outputs into this volume controller. So I'm going to go right and or left and right into here, left and right into here, and left and right into here. Oh, I did these wrong. Did I mess that one up too? No, I messed just this one up here. Did I get that? Yes, I got that right. And then my volumes are going to go into the mute. Okay? So now I have 3 different oscillators, and when I play a note, it's muted right now. They're all going to generate, it's the same synthesizer 3 times, right? And inside that synth, it's going to change. Now there's some cables that I missed. Really important here. Coming out of the synthesizer is the MTOF, and it also needs to go into each of these synths, right? This is going to go into that synth. So those 2 synthesizers need to be connected. The last thing is that each of these load bangs, or sorry, the bangs from the keyboard need to also go into the other keyboards, other synthesizers, sorry, right? So I connect those as well. And now I should get 3 different synthesizers with 3 different pannings. And let's hear what it sounds like. Cool. So anyways, I did take this, it probably at the end, it definitely got a little busy because there's a lot going on. But basically, I just moved the panner so that each synthesizer has its own panner and then connected all the cables so that we're generating 3 different synths at once, and each of them has their own individual pan. Anyway, so you guys, so this is just an example of what you could do for your assignment. I really want you to spend a little time thinking outside the box and thinking about how you could change it yourself, what you could do to make the sound unique, whatever interests you. So good luck on this.